Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. This is Firoz Manji from Daraja Press. Welcome to Organizing in the Time of COVID-19. My guest today is Dr. Sunny Omwenyeke. I hope I pronounced that right, who is a human rights activist and a veteran of the refugee movement in Germany. He was formerly the coordinator of the Regional Asylum Activism in the UK, in the West Midlands of the UK, and founded the Bremen Solidarity Centre and together We Are Bremen, a local self-organized and refugee advocacy group. He has studied international relations and global governance in Bremen and completed his doctorate in the UK on Transnational Advocacy Networks. He lives in Bremen now and works as an empowerment trainer with various refugee groups, and also lectures at the University of Bremen and Oldenburg. I want to wish you a very warm welcome to the show, Sunny, and it's so good to see you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Nice to see you, and thank you for inviting me to the program.
Oh, it's been great. I remember visiting you in Bremen and then also having you at one of our book launches in Berlin. So, Sunny, where are you now? Are you in Bremen?
I'm in Bremen. At the moment, I'm in Bremen, yes.
Okay. Now you've got a long history of working with refugees and migrants in Germany. Can you give us some sort of idea of the current situation? One gets the impression from mass media that, Germany is really treating its refugees well, and there's been fewer deportations and fewer attacks from right-wing groups. Does that convey what is actually happening?
It couldn't be further from the truth, because there are no deportations, so to speak, simply because the flights to other countries are not possible because of the restrictions that these other countries placed on the incoming and outgoing flights. But those refugees that Germany cannot deport, they simply put in prison. Unlike in many other countries, like in Spain or Portugal, they've granted some sort of residency to even refugees who were in prison, and released some of them out of prison, right? In Germany, it's different. You know, the treatment that Germany carries out in terms of its treatment of refugees is simply one that is basically underlined by the racism that is a major structure upon which the asylum system in Germany operates. I will give you an example. When the corona pandemic broke out, there was a federal law that was activated, so to speak. In this federal law, everybody was meant to observe social distancing, right? Which means you were bound to observe 1 meter to 1.50 meters from each other at any point in time, except, of course, if you belong to the same family and you didn't test positive for the virus, right? Actually, when people were asked to observe this, a lot of people did it, and those who, for one reason or the other, couldn't keep it at a certain point, violated it, they were actually fined. They were actually fined. You will say this is really very impressive, because the government is determined to ensure that the virus is not spreading, right? Not until it came to the refugees. You understand? It came to the refugees. All across Germany, there are massive camps that are built to house refugees in mass accommodations, right? In Bremen, right here in Bremen, we have a camp here that's in Lindenstrasse, which we've been trying to raise alarm over since a long time, because of the dehumanizing conditions and unbearable living situation in this camp. In the time, that this restriction was placed on everybody, where everybody was made to observe social distancing. This camp was housing about 670 refugees. And you know what? 6, 7, 8 people were being put together in a single room. In each of these rooms, the distance between each of the beds where the people were sleeping, was less than 1 meter in each cases, right? And then they advise everybody, you have to wash your hands. You have to wash your hands with soap. You have to do all the cleaning stuff and to ensure that there is no transfer of the virus. And you know what? For the refugees, they had to even take drinking water from the sink in the toilet because they didn't have other places where they could take fresh water from to drink. That is how much Germany love the refugees that we have here. You understand? So this idea that Germany is treating their refugees here very well is a marketing scam, because what is happening in Germany with refugees is simply unbelievable. In every situation, I cannot recall any other place where this happens. People who tested positive were deliberately left in the same place where those who tested negative were placed, and this only happens in the refugee accommodations. It's not only here in Bremen, it is also happening in Halberstadt, in Erwagen, both north and south and east of Germany. You have it in operation. So it's not an isolated treatment that we have here in Bremen. It's a general German malaise that is being practiced here with refugees in Germany. And in this particular camp, for example, here in Bremen, at the beginning of the pandemic, I think there were less than 7 who were infected. But because the authorities deliberately put everybody together, over 1/3 of the inhabitants of this camp were then infected. Out of 600 and something people that were there, over 200 got infected as at last month. So it's a it's a big fallacy, this picture that they present of how nice Germany is to its refugees.
So, what kind of medical facilities are provided in these detention centers?
You can say that there is really hardly any medical provisions there. In this particular camp in Bremen, for example, they came in there and tested some people. Those who were tested were quarantined. Normally, everybody knows worldwide quarantine lasts for 14 days. But there were people in this camp who were quarantined for over a month because they got tested and tested and tested again. Why? Because they were always mixed up with people who had already tested positive. You understand? In such a case, I mean, as a result, the number of those infected became very high. And why is that? This was a deliberate negligence, on the part of the authorities who left these people to be exposed to this pandemic in the way it was here in the camp.
So, I mean, this sounds scandalous.
Yes, it is.
So how come nobody knows about this? How come there's such silence?
We've been trying to raise alarm over this very camp for a long time. And the reason we're doing that is that we have members of our group that are in this camp. They report to us what is happening there, the security brutality that is going on there. Refugees are being attacked without cause, and there is nothing being done about it. The government is pretending that nothing is happening, and they are just silent about it. So there have been a history of inhumanities going on right in this camp. And the moment this pandemic was breaking out, it was clear to everybody that it's going to be a disaster when this is allowed to happen. What happened? The refugees themselves were the people in this camp. They were the people who first rose up against this what was happening there and was calling for the closure of this camp. You understand? And it was in the news media, it was everywhere in the newspaper, it was in the television, basically on every single newspaper publication in this area. And this was on a daily basis. This was as a result of the protest that was going on that we really pushed to make sure that the populace was sensitized to the lives and the conditions of the people in this camp. People knew about it, but it's a very conservative society, and therefore there is a tolerance of this particular treatment. Of course, this also goes to show how much racism plays in this whole pandemic problem that we have all over the world. Right here in Bremen, I can say, or in Germany in general, I can say, if you needed an obvious example of how racist the system is towards refugees, the corona virus pandemic provided it, because you couldn't ask every other person living in Germany to be separated by social distancing, and yet you force others to make sure that they are not able to observe that social distancing. This was the situation that was the case here in Bremen. And this is, for me, a very, very racist treatment that they carried out here. And don't forget, Germany, I say racism because for some people, this to accommodate refugees in this kind of place is nothing but an asylum policy. Now, if you think of it, Germany as a country has a fascination. They are obsessed with examining African bodies. If they are not displaying African bodies in zoo, which started over 100 years ago, they are bringing human remains. They are bringing human remains from Africa to come and use for their racist experiment to show the superiority of the white Germans to Africans and to other races, right? As we speak right now, right here in this city of Bremen, where I live, you still have human remains from Africa in their museum here. Right here in the city center, you still have African remains in their museum here. They have not released them. They have not given them back. That shows you what the mentality, how obsessed they are with African bodies, wanting to use all sorts of experiments to show that the Africans are inferior to the Germans, right? This was a little bit like it was like a slip from the social senator, Anja Stammann is her name, who is responsible for the refugee camps. She was in a way elated that a lot of refugees were now infected in this camp, and she described it that this will become interesting for the virologists, which goes to show, what they were thinking of from the very beginning, that yes, they could have a big pool of infected people to be experimented upon. You understand? Of course, they denied that they didn't have any of this cynical motive, but what explanation is there for you to carry out this kind of policies if it is nothing sinister?
I mean, it seems to be one of the sort of fundamental features that I became aware of during my period in Germany, was the silence about Germany's colonial history. I mean, there are no museums to the Herero genocide. There's no monument to that, and it shocks me to hear that tradition of having bodies in museums, etc., continues. But there are many anti-racist groups and refugee asylum NGOs in Germany. I mean, how have they responded in this situation?
The situation in Germany with anti-racism is a funny one. I say funny for the lack of a better word, because you have these white, nice, liberal guys and young ladies who are supposedly steeped in anti-racism. They engage in demonstrations, they engage in helping refugees and solving one problem or the other. And of course, then they point to the extreme extreme wings of the right wing to say they are the problem. But here's the deal. If they keep pointing to others, right, and they keep legitimizing their own position by their own activism, it prevents them from engaging in self-reflection, right? We talked about racism today. Many people will seem to think of racism as people putting on the white hood or whatever it is, or the compared to those who were clapping and at the lynching of black men and women in the US or whatever. It is in a different form. You understand? It's like Malcolm X once said. It's like a Cadillac. Every year you get a new model, right? It's like an onion. You peel it, you peel it, you peel it. You keep getting different forms of it as you continue the peeling. That is what is happening in Germany. Those who describe themselves as anti-racist and anti-fascist, they themselves are involved in with racist ideologies, with superiority of their race, that they have not really questioned this. They have not questioned their own involvement, how they benefit from a racist structure, and how they look at others without really realizing that they are engaging in a racist behavior. That is one of the big problems that we realize also through this corona pandemic, because you see how people act, then you wonder, are these not supposed to be anti-racist people? You are wondering, what exactly do they understand by anti-racism? You understand? I just mentioned the social senator, Anya Starman, who is here. When she was accused of being racist because of the policy that she practiced and just implemented in the camp I mentioned a moment ago, she said, she is not a racist because she has been active in the Antira for a very long time. That shows you exactly how much they understand about what it means to be anti-racist.
One of the things that has happened, though, has been that the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and, well, killing, as my partner says, 8 minutes of torture before he died.
Exactly.
And that has caused huge outrage. Even here in Canada, there have been massive demonstrations in all the cities across the United States. At least 48 different cities have mass demonstrations.
Right.
I Can't Breathe has become a major part of the even this morning, I received a video of a demonstration in one of the slum areas of Nairobi.
Right.
And what were they shouting? I can't breathe.
Yeah.
So I've noticed that there have been substantial demonstrations happening in Germany.
Right.
To what extent, how extensive have they been? And to what extent has that begun to change people's perception, especially the young people's perceptions of what racism actually means?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question, because the question seems to suppose that the people who engage in a racist act will realize what they are doing and will accept that what they are doing is a racist behavior or whatever. But the fact is this: going to demonstrations, coming out and shouting with those who experience racist abuse and treatment on a daily basis in this country, is only a very superficial behavior, it's a very superficial action, if it is not backed by concrete and committed efforts to really undercut racist institutions and the structures that underlie these policies that come out as racist in this society. That is the problem. The majority of the society is built on racism. You understand? The society is built on racism, and many people, even those white, young, liberals, they benefit from it. You know, the question is, are they ready to give up the benefits that they derive from this racist structure just to see a form of equality or justice? They are not ready to make that sacrifice. That is what it amounts to, you know.
But Sonny, I mean, you're right. Of course, these demonstrations don't represent a breakdown of the ideology of racism. But do you not think that the extent of mobilization, of involvement of young white people in these demonstrations is the crack that might let the light in, that it's a beginning of a process? Because what other route have we to crack open the nature of this society?
I can fully understand that optimistic tact, you know, and I wish I could share it that much. It's just that when you deal with this stuff on a daily basis, as I do here in Bremen, and you see how stabilized the structure of racism is in this country and in the Western world as a whole, you have to think that something more needs to be done than young people going out, having fun, running around, shouting with refugees or black people and people of color who suffer racism. You understand? The problem is, as long as the world tolerates the treatment of the others differently so much, you understand? As long as this is tolerated to this high degree, you understand? There is no alternative than for the people who are affected to keep making it uncomfortable for the governance of the racist structures to continue. So the main priority for me is not so much on mobilizing the white people to support, but to mobilize the people that are affected to say, no, enough is enough. Because the oppressors are never going to give you your freedom on a platter of gold. You're going to have to fight for it. Until you carry out that resistance, they are not going to say, okay, now I'm tired of oppressing you, I'm going to stop it. No, they have to realize that the longer they continue with this racist structure, the more expensive it becomes, that they can no longer pay the price. You understand? That, I think, will force the larger white majority to realize that we've got to rectify this mess. Otherwise, it's all going to be a mess for even we who supposedly enjoy from this stuff. So I don't pay much attention to the white folks, so to speak. I am more interested in getting those who are victims of this horrible system to stand up and not accept it and counter it. Unfortunately, many of us are also in the form that, yes, we live in a racist society. At the same time, we strive to achieve the utmost in this society, following the ideology, the elite oriented perspective that takes us to the top. You know, that is the problem, which I feel, and that brings me to the point that we've got to re-examine our values. What exactly are our values? Is it occupying big positions or becoming a CEO in the big companies that should be our values? Look at where it has taken us to. We're in a mess the world over, right? So I don't strive to become one of those big stuff, and I wouldn't hang my values around people who think of it in this sense. I would like to see a more equitable system where people, even with or without education, can live a decent life, can be treated with human dignity and free of racist treatment.
So can you talk about the extent of involvement of Black people, of refugees, of immigrants and migrants in the mobilizations that have taken place in solidarity with the killing of George Floyd?
Right. You know, like the world over, the video that was shown touched a lot of people and mobilized, became an impetus for a lot of the actions that took place. But here in Germany, we also have a history we have a history of racist police brutality. If you recall, Uri Jallo was burnt alive in the police cell in Germany till today. No justice was done for him. Layekonde was murdered right on the street here in Bremen. No justice was done for him. A policeman shot Christian Schwendeck, and nothing was done, you know, and on and on and on and on. Black men, women murdered in Germany, basically without justice. You understand? So there is also a pent-up anger there. Nevertheless, in the last several years, the Voice Refugee Forum, the Caravan for the Rights of Refugees and Migrants, and the work I have been doing here in Bremen kind of focuses on what I just said before: empowerment and solidarity among refugees and between refugees and the wider society. This perspective has opened the way for people to be able to connect a lot more than the perspective that seems to want to help in a very paternalistic manner, which we reject totally in our practice. And therefore, when this unfortunate incident happened, again, unfortunately, the people, at least from the group that I founded here, saw it like an affront. We've got to take a lead in mobilizing people to the street in solidarity for the Floyd family and others who were murdered. Okay, George Floyd was now the main point, but there were others, gays and trans, that are being murdered in the US every day that are not even reported, you know. So a combination of this pent-up anger helped in getting the refugees who were at the forefront here in mobilizing people to the streets to come out and lead the solidarity marches that we had here.
Well, that's certainly encouraging. Let me turn to a slightly related question. Last week was the 10th anniversary of the attack by the Israelis on the Gaza flotilla, the Freedom Flotilla, and we had one of the passengers speak about their experience, but she was a former Bundestag representative, but she talked about the degree to which nobody talks about Zionism, nobody talks about Israel and its treatment of Palestinians.
Right.
How does that connect to what you've been talking about, the nature of a deep racism, a failure to understand anything about Africa and so on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point, because for very many people, the criticism of the state of Israel automatically amounts to anti-Semitism, you know, and this idea that you kind of confuse one thing with the other, you know, leads to a situation where some people don't even really know exactly how to act in certain situations. Some don't know whether to support Palestinian refugees, or some don't know how or when to call out the Israeli government to say what they are doing is wrong, whether to the Palestinian in the occupied territories, or to African migrants in Tel Aviv and other places in Israel. Now, the point that is worth noting is this: the experiences of the Jews in this country. You understand? The experiences of the Jews in this country is taken seriously, at least officially, but the level of anti-Semitism that still exists in Germany is unbelievable. You understand? But people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it so that they are not labeled as this or that, right? But the fact that people are talking about it does not mean that the problem is gone. You know, exactly the same thing happens to the other broader issue of racism, which we talk about. You know, people don't want to talk about racism because they feel they don't want to offend anybody. They are not racist. That is whatever, and so forth and so on. But the fact that people are living and experiencing racist behaviors, racist, living under racist policies every day in this country. I mean, they have got to understand that racism is a structural, it's a deep historical structural problem. You know, it is rooted in this idea of the white Europeans being superior to the other races. And that is as a result of this difference, as a result of this belief, they think it is justifiable to treat all the others in however cruel, however inhumane it may be. It is fine to do it because it is coming from the superior race, so to speak. And this we try to deconstruct because all over the place you can see how fallacious this kind of belief is, how devastating it is also for people to live under such a system. But this is the reality that we live, and we are in a situation where very many people like us, we are not able to keep quiet over it, irrespective of the price that we have to pay for this outspokenness.
So, to the many people who will be watching, or are, or will be watching this this live stream, what message do you want to convey to them? Is there anything particular special that you want to get across to them?
There's one thing I believe strongly, and it is that you are not going to eat your cake and then have it in your own hands. You may have it in your stomach, but you know you're not going to have it in your own hands. As long as the Europeans and the Western governments keep destroying the lives and livelihoods of others in other continents and countries, those people are bound. It is their legitimate right. Whether it is really accepted or not, it is their legitimate right to seek survival, to seek human dignity. If that human dignity, survival, and better life happens to be in US, in Canada, in Germany, in Australia, in London, nothing is going to stop it. People are going to go out, people are going to try to survive. Moreover, Europeans did it before, and they were praised for it, for being so brave, being so visionary, and being so strong, and all that. And now the lives of others are being put in jeopardy, totally being destroyed, right? And then they are trying to stop people from survival, right? They are trying to stop people from survival. That would not work. It doesn't matter how much wall they build, they can be sure that people are going to overcome it and be in this very continent.
Sunny Omwenyeke, I want to thank you very much for both sparing time to be on this program, but also for your honesty and openness about the issues that are faced. Not talking around them, but addressing them in a way that I think will provoke reflection and as this person, Florent Rose, has just written, thank you so much for this conversation. I too want to thank you,
Thank
Sunny.
you. Thank you.
And a real delight to see you again.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, you take care. And once again, my appreciation for your
Thank
time.
you. All right.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Sunny, we will be in touch.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
That was Sunny Omwenyeke from Bremen, Germany, talking about the nature of racism and the conditions faced by migrants in the time of COVID. I'd like to thank you for joining us on this show, organizing in the time of COVID. And I hope that you will continue to listen in on our future broadcasts. On tomorrow, we will have Jim Thomas and Nathaniel from ETC Group talking about big data and big surveillance and industrial agriculture. Thank you for joining us on this show. This is Firoz Manchi signing off for today.